Hello and welcome to my Yugioh channel. Today we're looking at another of the archetypes within the latest deck build pack, and this is the apokadrosis archetype. It says here is the notes trying together Lost World, Magalencia, and early wyrm lore. They previously called this theme Long Hour, which is the Chinese reading of the character's story Ryuj, unsure of the exact name concept, but aware it was themed on Romance of the Three Kingdoms due to three factions warring to the top dog. With further information, they decided to go with a much clearer name, aware of the concepts Konami was likely trying to convey. They went with the apokadrosis to reflect the theme's name is on a play of sublimation/ascension. Basically, apokadrosis and Draco as the theme concept introduced by Konami on the Japanese version of Yugioh explained it as things that are dragon-like ascending to being an outright dragon. Notably, China heavily connects the Emperor to a dragon, which explains why it's dragon-like things that aren't quite dragons, as they have not taken the throne. Each main deck monster uses its type name and a word that has the Chinese word for dragon as a part of its radical, a portion of the character in question. As well, Terayuman refers to an act of ascension, glorification, or rising higher. This first card is Wyrm Rugged Apokadrosis of Dino Crag. It's a level 10 Earth attribute dinosaur type effect monster with 3000 attack and 1200 defense. You can only use the first, second, and third effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. You can shuffle this card from your hand into the deck. Add 1 apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Dino Crag from your deck to your hand. 2. During the main phase, if 2 or more cards were destroyed this turn, as a quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. And 3. You can place 1 face-up apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Dino Crag you control on the bottom of the deck, then target other cards on the field, up to the number of types among monsters on the field, destroy them. The card is a level 10 monster, which you would assume is going to be quite difficult to bring out, as it would typically need 2 tributes in order to do so. First ability, simply shuffling this card from the hand into the deck. You can search for the specific card that works alongside this. Depending on how good that card is, will determine how good that first effect is. Second ability, just if 2 or more of your cards have been destroyed this turn, and it doesn't have to be through your opponent destroying them, you can actually do that yourself. You can instantly special summon this card, so this is a way of mitigating the 2 tribute requirement. And the third ability just lets you place the same card that you search for to the bottom of the deck, then target other cards on the field, up to the number of types among monsters on the field, and destroy them. Currently, within the type, there are 3 types, so you've got the dinosaurs, the worms, and the sea serpents. That means if you're running those as a pure startup deck, you can get rid of up to 3 cards. It's also key to note that the design on it being a dinosaur is actually quite heavily supported, as existing dinosaur archetypes do work alongside with it, as dinosaurs do like to destroy each other to trigger off their effects. Think of things such as Baby Cerosaurus, and even I think the level 12 fusion monster does something similar to that. Wyrm Abyssal Apokadrosis of Serpent is a level 10 water attribute sea serpent effect monster. It has 3000 attack, 2000 defense. You can only use the first, second, and third effect of this per turn. 1. You can discard this card, add 1 apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Serpent from your deck to your hand. 2. During a main phase, if 2 or more monsters other than Wyrm Abyssal Apokadrosis of Serpent were sent from the hand and or deck to the graveyard this turn, as a quick effect, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. And 3. You can place 1 face-up apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Serpent you control on the bottom of the deck, banish your opponent's entire hand, and if they do, they draw the same number of cards. Isn't that great? I don't think there's that many sea serpent type monsters that reach level 10 or meet any conditions that actually support the way of this card's design. The first ability just lets you discard this to bring out its specific continuous spell card. Again, like the other one, we'll determine how good that is based on its reading. Second ability, just if 2 or more monsters other than itself have been sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, and this can be either triggered by yourself or your opponent or a combination of both, you can just instantly special summon this card from the graveyard. Often it's a good idea to maybe Foolish Burial this card, as it's a way of getting this straight into the graveyard to then do that. But if your opponent knows what you're doing, they will typically be able to stop that by a Called by the Grave effect, or they'll do something to, like Ash Blossom, to negate that ability. Third ability just lets you place the continuous spell version of itself to the bottom of the deck. you do get to banish your opponent's entire hand, and they do get to draw the same number of cards. There is a strategy out there, and there's a particular monster that prevents your opponent from drawing outside of their draw phase. That would work alongside this card, as that means they are left handless. That will make it very difficult for your opponent to come back unless they're running a Infernity type of deck. Another benefit is often your opponent is going to have crafted their hand, would have searched for the particulars that they need for the deck. So if you're familiar with how their deck proceeds and runs, timing this card's effect is the best way of disrupting your opponent. Baba, champion apokadrosis of Wyrm is a level 10 wind attribute worm type of monster with 3000 attack and 1500 defense. You can only use the first, second, and third effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. You can banish this card from your hand, add 1 apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Wyrm from your deck to your hand. 2. If a monster becomes banished, face up while this card is banished, and there are currently 2 or more banished monsters other than Baba champion apokadrosis of Wyrm, you can special summon this card. And 3. You can place 1 face-up apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Wyrm you control on the bottom of the deck. Add 1 apokadrosis card from your deck, graveyard, or banishment to your hand, except Baba champion apokadrosis of Wyrm. The first ability just lets you banish this card from your hand. That's decent, as it's just an instant way of searching its particular continuous spell. Second ability, if a monster becomes banished, face up whilst this card is also banished, and there are 2 more banished monsters other than itself, you can instantly special summon this card. It's designed as though you banish your opponent's cards. That's fine, as that helps you to just reoccur this effect. Third ability, just taking its continuous spell card, putting that to the bottom of the deck. You can search for any of the apokadrosis cards, be that a monster, a spell, or trap card, from either the deck, the graveyard, or the banishment straight to your hand. So it has instant recovery if you're later in within the duel. Wyrm Luminous Apokadrosis of Starforge is a level 10 light attribute dragon type ritual pendulum effect monster. It has 3500 attack and 2500 defense, with pendulum scale of 0. The pendulum effect is you can only use the pendulum effect of this card's name once per turn. 1. During your main phase, you can add 1 apokadrosis card from your deck to your hand, except a pendulum monster, then destroy this card. The monster effect, you can ritual summon this card with Wyrm Luminous Apokadrosis of Starforge, must be special summoned by its own effect. You can only special summon Wyrm Luminous Apokadrosis of Starforge once per turn. 1. If a monster on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, while this card is in the etch deck, you can attribute 1 level 10 apokadrosis monster, and if you do, special summon this. This is treated as a ritual summon. Then you can destroy up to 2 cards you control, and if you do, place an equal number of apokadrosis continuous spells from your deck face up on your field. The attack on this card is okay for a level 10 monster. It has 3500 attack points. It is a pendulum scale of 0, so it does let you pendulum summon into level 1 monsters, which is nice. It being a dragon ritual pendulum monster does make it quite unique. I don't think of any other combinations that meet these conditions. I think there is like a paladin card which was the Nirvana High Paladin, and that's the nearest kind of example I can give as to something somewhat similarly designed. The first ability, which is the pendulum one, lets you search for a apokadrosis card from the deck to hand. It doesn't matter which one, so long as it's in the archetype, it can be used, and this card then gets instantly destroyed. Pendulum monsters that are destroyed then go face up in the etch deck. Remember that, that's actually quite important. The monster effect lets you just special summon this card without having to use a dedicated ritual spell. This being an inbuilt ability prevents a lot of the downsides that a lot of ritual monsters have. In the past, most of them had a dedicated named spell card to bring them out, and that meant running all these bricks, which you would often kind of brick into various cards and not be able to bring out your ritual cards. These days, you have generally more support for rituals which are generic and let you bring out things just based on the attribute they are, or lets you summon cards which are their own archetype or sub-archetype in certain cases. The first ability is if a monster on the field is destroyed by battle or effect, provided this card is in the extras deck, so that will happen through its first effect, which was a pendulum effect. By just attributing a level 10 apokadrosis monster, and they're all level 10, this card can instantly be special summoned. You do then have to destroy up to 2 cards that you control, but they get replaced with continuous spell cards from the same archetype. Apokadrosis Wild Creation is a quick play spell card. You can only use one of the first and second effect of this card's name once per turn and only once that turn. 1. Add one apokadrosis monster from your deck to your hand. Then you can add one apokadrosis pendulum monster from your hand to your extra deck face up. During your main phase, if you control a apokadrosis pendulum monster card, you can banish this card and one apokadrosis monster from your graveyard. Special one apokadrosis monster from your deck with the same original type as the monster banished. The first ability lets you add an apokadrosis monster from the deck to hand, so it can be any of them. And then from there you can add a apokadrosis pendulum monster, so that's the current one, from your hand to your extra deck face. That's another way of bringing it straight to the extra deck without having to use its pendulum effect. That's only concerning if your opponent, or you fear that your opponent has any sort of negation abilities. Second ability, provided you have the apokadrosis pendulum monster card, this card can be banished and one apokadrosis monster from your graveyard to instantly special summon another version of apokadrosis, provided it's the same original type as the monster banished. Given that you only have 3, you'd be banishing one to bring out a copy of itself from the deck, assuming that we don't get another couple of versions of these cards. Apokadrosis Ascension Crest of Transmigration is a field spell card. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name once each. 1. When this card resolves, take 3 monsters from your deck, 1 dinosaur, 1 sea serpent, and 1 wyrm. Add one of them to your hand, banish one other, and send the last to the graveyard. Also, you cannot special summon for the rest of the turn except dragon, dinosaur, sea serpent, and monsters. 2. If you have a face-up Guamba Luminous Apokadrosis of Starforge in your extra deck, you can special summon up to 3 Apokadrosis monsters with different types, 1 each from your deck, graveyard, and or banishment. This card is attempting to tie the entire deck together. Given that the entire archetype so far consists of dinosaur, sea serpent, worms, and dragons, makes sense. This lets you add one of them to the hand, so you'll be doing that with the dinosaur one. One of them that gets banished, I think that is the one, and each of their effects work from those particular fields, your kind of field. You are restricted to using only those types of monsters for the rest of those turn, but that's fine, it's just a special summon. Second ability, provided you have the ritual monster in your extra deck, which a couple of cards already do itself, it within its effect does that, and also the quick play spell card, you're instantly able to special summon up to 3 apokadrosis monsters with different types, so each of them from the deck, graveyard, and or banishment will allow you to go into various cards more easily, and then hopefully go into rank 10 monsters. Apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Dino Crag, so this is the one that supports the dinosaur type level 10. It's a continuous spell. You can only control 1 Apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Dino Crag. 2 Apokadrosis monsters you control gain 300 attack, and 3 Apokadrosis pendulum monsters and level 10 or higher monsters whose original type is dinosaur you control gain this effect. Once per turn, when the effect of a monster on the field with less attack than this card is activated, as a quick effect, you can place 1 face-up Apokadrosis continuous spell you control on the bottom of the deck, negate the activation. First ability is just a limit in that you can only control 1 copy of this card. Otherwise, if you were able to use this multiple times in a turn, that would be unfair. Second ability just provides your Apokadrosis monsters with an additional 300 attack points, turning them from a 3000 attack monster to a 3300 attack monster. And the third ability allows your Apokadrosis pendulum monsters and level 10 or higher monsters who are dinosaur types, but they have to be the original levels, to be able to negate the effects of a monster on the field with less than the 3300 attack points when this card is activated. It does force this card to then place 1 face-up Apokadrosis continuous spell on the bottom of the deck, so it can either be itself or another version of a different card. That card won't be that searchable outside of the specific archetype, but bear in mind that you're also able to shuffle your deck, hopefully within the duel, and so it won't stay on the bottom of your deck for too long. These effects that grant additional effects to other monsters are a good way of synergizing decks together, whereas this almost seems like trying to enhance and support various archetypes and typings together to make them more useful. Apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Serpentfall is a continuous spell card. 1. You can only control 1 Apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Serpentfall. 2. Your Apokadrosis monsters cannot be destroyed by battle. And 3. Apokadrosis pendulum monsters and level 10 or higher monsters whose original type is Sea Serpent, you control gain this effect. Once per opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can place one face-up apokadrosis continuous spell you control on the bottom of the deck. Then target one card on the field, return it to the hand. First ability just limits it to only having one of those copies of the cards on the field, same as the other one. Second ability provides your apokadrosis monsters immunity from being destroyed by battle, which is not bad. Third ability, it allows your pendulum monster and a level 10 or higher monster who happens to be a sea serpent the ability to take a apokadrosis continuous spell that you control, put it on the bottom of the deck, and then you can target a card on the field. It gets returned to the hand. So it's a decent way of disrupting your opponent. Since it's a quick effect and it can only be used during your opponent's turn, it's a way of disrupting your opponent before they can go into key cards. Apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Wyrm is a continuous spell card. You can only control one Apokadrosis Ascension Gate of Wyrm Haze. 2 any monster sent from the field to graveyard during your opponent's turn is banished instead. And 3 Apokadrosis Pendulum monsters and level 10 or higher monsters whose original type is Worm you control gain this effect. Once per opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can place one face-up Apokadrosis continuous spell you control on the bottom of the deck, then target one face-up monster on the field, change its attack to 0. First ability is the same limitations on the other continuous spell cards, you can only have one of them. Second ability means that any monster sent from the field to graveyard during the opponent's turn is banished, so depending on your situation that could be either a good thing or a bad thing, but when it's disrupting what your opponent does, often they can't recover from the banish pile. Third ability grants your apokadrosis pendulum monsters and level 10 or higher monsters who happen to be worm types the ability to take your apokadrosis continuous spell, put it on the bottom of the deck, and then you zero out your opponent's attack points of a particular monster. Out of the 3 effects, it's probably the least relevant for the time being, as there are cards which are better suited to the deck, but it's a decent enough effect to warrant running. It mentions here that there are a number of reprints, so we'll actually briefly cover what those cards do and how they would synergize with the deck. Senju of 1,000 Hands is a light attribute fairy type level 4 with 1,400 attack and 1,000 defense. When this card is normal or flip summoned, you can add one ritual monster from your deck to your hand. Given that there is a ritual monster and it can ritual summon itself through its own effect, that's justification for why you'd want this card. Planet Pathfinder is an Earth attribute machine type level 4. It has 1,000 attack and 1,000 defense. You contribute this card and one field spell from your deck to your hand. This isn't a particularly bad card for the deck, as it does have its own dedicated field spell in the form of Apokadrosis Ascension Crest of Transmigration. The idea of the field spell is that it's able to help you search and reveal for those particular monsters, the dinosaur, the sea serpent, and the worm, and let you special summon each of those from different areas of the hand, the deck, and the graveyard, enabling you to go into these cards. Also, it's worth noting that the 3 monsters themselves do not need to be normal summoned, so eating up your normal summon through the effect of the Planet Pathfinder is also not an issue. Arch Nemesis Protos is a dark attribute worm type level 11 monster with 2,500 attack and 3,000 defense. It cannot be normal summoned or set and must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing 3 monsters with different attributes from your graveyard and off face-up field. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, and you can declare one monster attribute on the field, destroy all monsters on the field with that attribute, also until the end of the next turn, and either player can special summon monsters with that attribute. You can only use this effect of Arch Nemesis Protos once per turn. This is working with the deck as it's a level 11 monster, and anything that's level 10 or above works in conjunction with this. It's a worm type, so that's the reason for it, and the current 3 other monsters happen to be all of separate attributes. One is a fire attribute, one is a wind attribute, one is a water attribute, and so meets those conditions. This is protected from being destroyed by card effects. Also, it has the opportunity to wipe out your opponents of a declared attribute. Obviously, you're not going to choose Dark, otherwise it would self-implode this card. But if you choose any other attribute, it would maybe work to your advantage, as the monsters that are destroyed of your own that go into the graveyard are fine, as they can be recurred, whereas they might be more difficult for your opponent. Super Dimensional Robot Galaxy Destroyer is a rank 10 light attribute machine type Xyz effect monster with 5,000 attack and 2,000 defense. It requires 3 level 10 monsters Once per turn, you can detach one material from this card, destroy all spell or trap cards your opponent controls. Your opponent can activate spell or trap cards in response to this effect's activation. Given that all three of the monsters are level 10, bringing this card out isn't a problem. It has the ability to destroy all of your opponent's spell and trap cards, therefore it's like a Harpy's Feather Duster in a 5000 attack body. It also prevents your opponent from responding to this card's activation, but it doesn't have a quick effect, and so it can be gotten rid of still before ever activating its effect. And Yugioh of Theological Demiurgy is a Link monster. It's a Link 3 Dark Attribute Cyrus monster. Points are the left, the bottom, and the right, with 3,500 attack points. It requires 3 level 5 or higher monsters, and it cannot be used as Link material. This Link summon card is unaffected by other monster effects. You can only use each of the following effects of Yugioh of Theological Demiurgy once per turn. During a main phase, if you control this card that was Link summoned using the 3 monsters that have different attributes and types on the field, you can destroy all other cards on the field. If your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck except during the damage step, you can special summon a Wild Legacy monster from your deck. This makes sense in its summoning as it requires 3 level 5 or higher monsters, and with its first effect, so long as the monsters that you use are 3 different types and attributes, which all of those 3 monsters were, you can instantly destroy all other cards on the field. It's a good way of clearing both yours and your opponent's field and just leaving you with this particular card. The other aspect is if the opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, you're then given the ability to special summon a World Legacy monster from your deck. Overall, I think this deck looks quite promising, and there are different interactions depending on the types of cards you have. Most common ones being the level 10 dinosaur monsters. Those are the ones that are going to synergize best. I don't think we have so many in terms of sea serpents or worms, but then that alludes to potentially having more in the future to supplement these cards, as it's more of an engine rather than its own deck. Whatever you guys think, I'd love to hear those in the comments down below. Make sure to like the video, it really helps support the channel, and please subscribe.